We'll just go ahead and get started here. So this is our first of 5 in this risk management lunch webinar series, which is presented by the Go Farm Connect project, which is a project of renewing the countryside. And if you're just joining us, we have a few housekeeping items. Everybody is muted to start with here, and we are going to be recording the webinar. So if you need to come back and review at a later time, or if this time didn't work for you, this will be recorded and you can visit it at your leisure. We're going to have any questions that pop up be placed in the chat. And we have Laura managing the chat. She'll keep an eye on that. And then at the end, during the question time, we'll ask your question. So please go ahead. If you get something something pops in your mind, go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll address it here at the end. All right. So this is, again, one of many webinar series over the growing season. We wanted to do some simple check-ins over the growing season at a convenient time over the lunch hour and talk about relevant topics to risk management. So we're going to start the day today with crop planning, but you can see the different topics we're going to be going throughout the growing season. And then each of our webinars are going to be followed by a field day. The following Tuesday, 5 to 7:30. Of course, this will depend slightly on who's hosting it, our farmer host, but we want to make these topics relevant and real. And so we want to follow what we talk about during these webinars with a real farm visit to see what farmers are doing on the ground. And so our next webinar meeting will be on June 17th, again, noon to 1:30. The webinar will go till 1, but we'll feel free to stick around for another half hour for questions, chit chat, all of that stuff. So if you would like to register for this, go ahead and scan that QR code right now, and then it'll register. These are free, so no worries on payment or anything like that. And the Go Farm Connect project is a farmer-to-farmer initiative that helps farmers with technical assistance that range from growing to getting a loan to doing record keeping, whatever sort of support and needs. We want to support you with with this project. Particularly, we like to get you connected with USDA programs, whether you're looking for a high tunnel or a low interest loan. This project serves to help farmers navigate through all of those difficulties in some of these government programs. And so with that, let's just jump in now to our lunch webinar series on crop planning for risk management. Today, I'm going to be joined by Madeline Estrell from Cimarron. You're going to have to say it for me. Cimarron Community Farm, where she's the co-director, with Elise Hansen, who won't be joining us today, but is here in spirit. We'll be talking about a few different methods for managing your crop planning. So probably the first question that's on everybody's mind is, what the heck does crop planning have to do with risk management? And we tossed this idea around a lot, and we decided that instead of talking about the different insurance programs, crop insurance that are out there, let's start where farmers are actually at. And the truth is, there really isn't an effective crop insurance program for small fruit and vegetable and flower farmers. And so what most of us have been doing is just having a lot of different crops grown. So a lot of crop diversity. That's been our crop insurance policy, and it's worked pretty well for us to date. However, when you have many different kinds of crops going on, and all these different crops take different requirements and have different costs associated with it, it's really easy to kind of miss the mark on what things sell and what things are expensive to grow or what things are not. And the crop planning aspect of your farm is one thing that will affect all of the different direct costs of your business. So it's one thing you really want to get right, and we thought we would share with you some tools and some tips that other farmers are doing to make that crop planning much more efficient and effective, and hopefully save you some money and get you in the growing the right crops that will make your farm prosper and sustainable. So with that, we're going to jump into a tool that Natalie Hoydel and Ariel Pressman and I developed for a class we were teaching on high tunnel and high tunnel management, which we'll be doing again next year. If you guys are interested, probably it'll start around February. So we wanted to start off with crop planning, kind of focused first on the customer. What do people want to buy, and what are they looking for at the markets? Let's start with that step instead of I've got this amount of rows in my field. What should I fill them with? So the tool that I'm going to share with you was developed for that class. I've adapted it a little bit so that you can use it outside the high tunnel and just in any sort of crop planning um, uh, uh, environment. But we're really going to focus on these four questions: what to plant, when to get that thing planted, how much of it to plant, and then how much space is that going to require. A lot of mistakes I've made myself and seen other farmers make is that they have planted too much of one thing and not enough of another. Like one year I didn't plant enough basil, and I could have sold a ton of basil. And then one year I planted a lot of okra and no one wanted it. Um, and of course, that uses up valuable space. A lot of us are on very small acreages, and we're farming pretty intensely. So space has also been an issue for me too, where I have a plan to grow all this, and then I've run out of space, and then I don't know where to put things. So hopefully this tool, which is a free Excel spreadsheet, will help you navigate some of that and plan for a more effective growing season. So there are some things you're going to need to know about your operation. So in the field, you're going to need to know your row length and your row width. If you're growing onions or lettuce, a lot of times you're doing, several rows in a bed. So you might want to kind of have that information in your head before jumping into this spreadsheet. You're also going to want to know the space between the rows and then the number of rows that you have to work with in your field or high tunnel or whatever it is you're planting into. The next thing you're going to need to know is quite a bit about your crops. Most of this stuff you should be able to find on your seed packet, but most of the time a nice Google search will get you all of this. We have also made you a harvest or a crop planting guide that Natalie worked really hard on and has adapted a lot of those plants to Minnesota growing conditions. And it's probably a little bit more of an accurate tool than what you might find on Johnny's or some other crop calculator. So these are those items you're going to need to know: days to maturity, starting period, space between the plants, spacing between the rows of the plant, and then the length of the harvest season, and then transplant or direct seeding dates and yield per plant. So once you know all these things, then you can start to use the tool. So this spreadsheet that we created has all the different questions in the different colors. And then I've also created another column there to predict how much money you could potentially make off of your plants. This is the crop planning guide that Natalie created. You're going to find stuff that is good for Minnesota growing conditions. You're going to find stuff that is good for high tunnels, good for direct seeding, and good for transplanting. So those are the different tabs on the bottom of the spreadsheet. The other tool that is right on the spreadsheet with this crop planning calculator is a crop planning map. This has all the cells in an Excel spreadsheet in the same kind of format. And so you can kind of calculate, how long they are. And then it's sometimes helpful. You probably all have your own method of doing it. And, whatever one that is working is going to be the best fit. But there's another tool there if that is helpful for you guys. So let's jump into that crop calculator guide. Again, we are using this spreadsheet here. So we're going to start with number one here, and that is what to plant. And the best way to do this is to start thinking what sold last year at the market. What were people asking for? What was something that was in high demand? And start looking at those crops. The thing to think about for profitability and sustainability is what it was a high value crop. Is the tomato that sells for $4 a pound, is that maybe a little bit higher value than let's say the watermelon that sells for 25 cents a pound or something like that. Um, and then of course thinking about continually harvestable plants. That's always a nice thing. Like basil or dill or some of those loose leaf lettuces. You can get several harvests out of that, and that is going to contribute to your bottom line a little bit better. Quick growth is always nice. Things that can take up vertical space in a very tight a production area is always a handy thing to think about, as well as what does really well at your own operation. So once you kind of have in the back of your mind that, okay, customers were really asking for this actually really did really well at my farm, and this made me more money than I thought it would, and you have kind of that short list, then start identifying those different stats you need on the crop. So I'm going to use the example of a Brandywine tomato because this is, in my experience, a lot of customers ask for this every time. So I will be going through this spreadsheet using the Brandywine tomato as my guinea pig here. So you can see I've picked up all the data here on this, and this was just on the back of my seed packet. All right, so what to plant? We're going to go ahead in that first place. We're going to say Brandywine tomato and fill that in and move along to the next one. So the next item is when to plant. Here, you're going to ask yourself, when do people start asking for it? And, I always get, usually Memorial Day weekend, someone asks for sweet corn and tomatoes. And, that's impossible. So that's not going to work. But a lot of times, about mid-July is when people start saying, don't you have tomatoes yet? Don't you have tomatoes yet? And it's, this is Minnesota. It's usually, August 1st or something. But if I could get a tomato by mid-July, I bet I'd be the first one at market, and I bet I'd sell it. So in this example, let's say, all right, we want to shoot for that mid um, uh, um, uh, July time. We want it to be doable, but let's set a goal of like mid-July, 7/19. That's the first, that's a midway through the season, a Saturday. So let's put that day as our first ripening and throw that into the calculator. So when we do that, we're going to put that date here. And then we're going to move on to the next one, which is days to maturity. So this you should find on that seed packet. Again, if you can't find it, check out that guide that Natalie created. And here we know that it's going to take 78 days for a Brandywine tomato to mature. So I'm going to throw that in the next cell on the spreadsheet. And then where you don't see any lines, that means there's a formula there. So this is now going to spit out the date for you of when you need to seed that plant into the ground. So if I want to get a tomato ripe by the 19th of July, I need to have that sucker planted in the ground on May 2nd. So I would have already need to have that planted in the ground. Luckily, I didn't plant my tomatoes yet because we've had frost. So, you have to take this with a little bit of reality too. So is this really going to work or is this really not? Um, so that's the handy thing about this spreadsheet. It'll kick out the date of when you need to transplant that crop. But that's not the whole story, right? We have some plants that we can just direct seed into the garden, into the field, but some of them, like tomatoes, need to be started indoors. So that's the next step is I need to see how long I need to start that tomato inside so I can transplant it on the 2nd and have it be viable. So again, on the seed packet or in the guide, you can take a peek at your different crops and see how many days they need to start inside. For tomatoes, it's an average of 35 to 42 days indoors. So I'm going to plug that number in on the next cell here, and I'm going to go with the shorter one. Maybe I should be going with the longer one, but that's what I decided. So I plugged in 35 days here, starting indoors, and then it kicks marks out the date for me that I need to sow that seed in the cells indoors. So that would have been March 28th. So I know we're already well into the planting season now, so this might not be relevant for folks now, but maybe next year you can maybe this will be valuable for you in your crop planning. All right. Now, the next thing that's really kind of handy to know, especially if you're doing lots of succession plantings with like lettuce or radishes or something like that, is how long is that duration of harvest and when can you put the next thing in? So, tomatoes, of course, usually we don't do these in succession because there's such a long harvest season. So, tomatoes and brandywines in particular have about 10 weeks of fruiting time. They do fruit afterward, but it's kind of insignificant. So there's about 70 days of the harvest window. So that's what I'm going to put in this next cell. And then it's going to spit me out another date of probably by, September 27th, I can expect to be pretty much done harvesting tomatoes. So let's say I was growing this in my high tunnel. That might be a nice date for me to rip that sucker out and maybe seed some radishes or some lettuce to, maybe get one more crop in on my high tunnel. Or if maybe you've got some other crops in the field, you'll know when your next succession can start if it's lettuce or radishes or some of those short growing crops. All right, so that's our second question answered. When to plant? Now let's ask ourselves, how much should we plant? And to do this properly, you're going to need to know the units that you sell in. Are you selling your tomatoes by pound? Are you selling them, or are you selling your celery by head or cabbage by head? Are you selling kale by bunch or by pound or by bag? What is your measurement that you use for that product? And then where do you sell this product and what are those sales that usually take place? Of course, that kind of depends a lot on records that you may or may have had in the past. But you can also just use those general feelings too, like, oh, I think I sold a lot of kale this year, so I'm going to I'm going to plant a little bit more of that or something. So here's one of the steps here for predicting, or one of the helpful ways to kind of get an idea of how much you're going to need to grow. Start thinking about those sales. So here in this particular example, let's say this farmer sold at the farmer's market. They did about 10 pounds a week of tomatoes, and they were selling for about 10 weeks. So we got 100 pounds there. Twice that growing season, they sold to the high school, and the high school orders in 40-pound increments. So they had another 80 pounds there. And then a couple restaurants, a couple times during the year, they ordered 20 pounds of tomatoes. So we got another 60 pounds of tomatoes from that. The neighbor lady always buys, a bunch for canning in the late year. And then you figured you use about 4 pounds of tomatoes yourself throughout that growing season each week. So adding it all together, you know that last year you consumed about 320 pounds of tomatoes. So we could just take that number and again, adapt this to the unit. Let's say you had you sold 100 bunches of kale, or you sold 40 heads of romaine lettuce, something like that. That's how you would use this tool. All right, so we're going to put that 320 pounds in for estimated product sales in that first cell. And then, since we're in farming, we know that if we plant for 320, we're probably not going to get 320 that are actually going to be sellable, right? That's just how farming is. Some's going to spoil, some's going to, not really be sellable, and maybe we'll use them ourselves. So what you need to do is give yourself a percent of that product that's going to be, you think, damaged or unsold. I've been using 20% for the most of my farming career. We have some other farmers on here. Maybe they'll talk about their percentage if they have one. So we're going to put in, that if we really want to get 320 pounds, we need to really grow for 384 pounds because we know we're going to lose some in that process. So it's just simply taking that number, that goal, and then increasing it by that percentage. You don't have to do that math. You just put in the percent that you think you're going to lose, and the calculator will spit out the amount that you should shoot for, product required to get to that estimated product sales. And then once you have that real number, okay, I want 320 pounds, so I really actually have to grow 384 pounds. Then we can take your average yield for plant, and this is where Natalie Heudel really did some hard work in that crop planning guide, because you look at the stuff in Johnny's, you look on the internet, and the yields per plant are really kind of ridiculous for Minnesota. This is a hard growing area. We don't have the production that they maybe do in Tennessee or New Jersey or something like that. So use the guide for this one in particular because it's much more accurate to our area here in Minnesota. So you're going to plug in that yield per plant. So here for Brandywine tomato, it's between 20 and 30 pounds. And I'm going to be a little bit cautious here, and I'm going to go with that 20 pounds. I'm going to plug that in for the yield per plant, and then it's going to tell me how many plants I'm going to need to plant. And there again is a couple different ways to do this. Some things we plant per plant, like tomatoes. So I'm going to plant, 80 tomatoes or 15 tomatoes. But other things like lettuce, we don't really plant by plant. That would be really impossible to figure out how many spinach or how many loose leaf lettuce plants you need to put in the ground. You do more of those by a square foot basis. So I've got both options here, depending on what plant you or what method you're using. You can either go by product yield, or you can go by how many square feet or how many plants are there. So again, what you're going to do, and the spreadsheet will take care of most of this for you, but it's going to take that average yield per plant or the average yield per square foot, and it's going to divide your product yield by that amount, and it's going to spit out how many plants you need to plant or how many square feet of the row you're going to need to plant. So in this case, the math comes out to 19.2 plants. In modern science, we have not figured out how to do 0.2 of a plant yet. So I'm going to say 20 plants in my yield per plant. So I need 20 plants in my production in my field to get to this 384 pounds that I'll need for market. So now we're going to ask how much space we need. Now, if you're calculating on a square foot basis for your production, you already have this step pretty much done. But if you're doing by plant, then we need this to do this next step, so number 4. And again, the things you're going to need to know are your row length, your row width, so that's like your bed width, the space between the rows, and the number of rows that you have. So now the first question in this step is to decide on what kind of spacing you want between the plants. For Brandywine tomatoes, it can be, between 2 feet to 3 feet. Let's see what I decided to put in here. I went with the tighter spacing. Okay, so maybe I have this in a high tunnel or something where I have, real high demand on that space. So I'm going to go with a tighter planting. So I put 24 inches in here, and this is sensitive, so it does need to have inches in here. So if you're doing feet, you got to calculate it down to inches. Otherwise, you'll screw up the formulas. And when you put in your spacing in between plants, it's going to automatically calculate how many row feet you're going to need for those plants. So again, you put 20 feet per plant. You've got 20 plants that we are planting, and it's going to kick out how much feet you need. So we put in our 24 inches, and it's going to say you need about 38.4 feet in your row to plant. So you know exactly how much space you're getting into. Let's say your rows are 40 feet. One thing that is nice is this will calculate how many rows that you need. So if you give us your row length, let's say your row length is 32, and we have 40 feet of space needed, it's going to tell you, you need one row, and then you would need 8 feet of another row. So if you're more into like the row plantings, this will be a helpful step to have under your belt. Um, all right, and that actually brings us to the end of the calculator here. So it'll tell you what to plant, how much to plant, what kind of yield you're going to get, and how many plants that are going to be required to do that, as well as how much space in your garden or high tunnel or field it's going to take up. And then I do have one other step here, and that is sales per crop. So you can put in your average sold yield and your price per unit, and then it'll give you some estimated dollars that you could make on that crop. This is a nice gut check for if you're planting and you realize that, boy, this thing isn't going to make all that much money and it's taking up a lot of my space. You can kind of early on swap things out that way. So there we are. We went through the whole spreadsheet here. We filled it all in. Again, anything without a box around it, there's an automatic calculator in there. So don't type in those areas. Just type in the boxes, the different information, and it'll spit out the other information that you need. And again, there is a crop map. If you're more of a visual learner and want to do it that way, this tool should help with that as well. So that is the tool here that I wanted to share with you. But now let's hear from a farmer, and let's hear how they do things at Cimarron Community Farm. Let's have Madeline jump in here. Madeline, would you introduce yourself a little bit? And I believe you have co-host ability, so you should be able to drive here.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to tell you all about our farm and also how we use crop planning for resilience. Cimarron Community Farm is a nonprofit farm located in Lake Elmo, Minnesota. We're situated in a low-income neighborhood, so a lot of our food we donate to this neighborhood for free. We kind of have a different model than most market gardens or market farms, so we're not actually selling a lot of our food, which changes um, how we tackle crop planning. Um, I will get a little bit into our programs. Could you hit next? I'm not sure.
Sure. Yep. No
Okay,
problem.
thank you. So we're just a half-acre farm, which sounds small, but last year we produced 17,000 pounds of food, which is like orders of magnitude more than your average conventional farm. And that's because we're doing a lot of different crops, and we're spacing things really tightly, and we're caring for each plant pretty intensively. All of the food we grow goes into the programs that you can see on your screen. So we have a community garden program for residents in the neighborhood. They're not allowed to grow in their own yards in this property, so we have community garden spaces for them to grow their own food. We do have a paid CSA program, so that is an opportunity for members outside of this low-income neighborhood to invest in their neighborhood, in their neighbors' livelihoods. We have free food distributions where we partner with large scale food shelves that bring like the hygiene items, dry goods, pet food, and then we bring all the produce for those. And we also have a farmer's market on site at the farm every other week, and that's also free, no cost to everyone who comes. We do a lot of education with teens, little kids, families, farmer groups, and other sorts of events. When thinking about um, crop planning for risk management, here are some things that we implement when navigating this. Usually we're planning in the winter. We're using all of our notes from throughout the season to help us direct which way our crop plan will go for the coming year. So first thing, a lot of this Eric covered, but I'll just reiterate it from my own perspective. Crop diversity is key. So not just growing one type of lettuce or one type of melon or one type of broccoli one time. The more diversity you have across varieties, across families of crops, the more resilience you have in case diseases do hit. So on the left side, you can see a runty little lettuce that got hit with aster yellows last year. A lot of our lettuces did. We hadn't really experienced that, but we did notice that our Cherokee lettuce, which is a red, it's a larger leaf red lettuce, that one was not as impacted. So we lost a lot of our romaines. Like that is not the kind of romaine you want to be taking to market right there. But um, we still had lettuce to offer because we had different varieties. Um, Location on your farm is important as well for risk management. On a half acre, there's not a ton you can do, but we do have like lower spots or areas where we're certain that flea beetles are a given. We have areas that are a little sandier. Like you'll know your farm, you'll know your soil types. Um, Micro location helps a lot. So if there's a washout in one area, and you lost all your carrot seeds right there, maybe you also seeded carrots on a little higher area and it's not a total loss to you. Um, we also use successions as a form of risk management. So um, you can see these melons here. This kind of goes in with variety research as well. But the melon on the right, we do at least two successions of melons throughout the season. The earlier one last year with a wet, cool weather, it just absolutely tanked. We thought, okay, there's not cantaloupes this year. So be it, I guess. And then it dried out and warmed up a little bit, and our second succession of melons, um, it went off. So we were able to actually provide melons to the community last season. And if we hadn't done two successions of that, that would not have happened. So we do successions of almost everything. Our only you got to be careful with your one-off crops then, like peppers, garlic, onions. Those ones we take a lot more care of. We make sure they're going in healthier. We attend to them a lot more after we plant them because it's your only shot. If something goes wrong with those, then you don't have your onions. Things like broccoli, lettuce, um, turnips, it's like we're putting in so many successions that if there is a failure, we know that it's not the end of the line for the season. Variety research has been really important too. Kind of going back to the melon story here, this is a Sharon Tay on the screen. And they're supposed to be just so sweet and succulent and thin peeled. And um, I was so excited to try them, but we got a rainstorm right before they were ready and they all burst. And they got all rotten. Like they're so delicious, which means like bacteria also love them. So we like that did not work for us. Given the conditions that year, we were like, okay, the Sharon Tay has like basically no storage capacity, even holding capacity in the field. Whereas some of the more resilient Hannah's Choice, Sarah Choice, cantaloupes, they're just a little thicker. You do lose a little bit of that sweetness or that depth of flavor, but you actually do get melons out of the deal. So it's up to you to research um, disease resistance and understand, like Eric was saying, like what does the seed packet say? What does it ask of you as the farmer so that you get something out of it? And then lastly, customer feedback is super important. So, as a nonprofit, that looks very different than how it would look if you're selling to restaurants or at one of the larger farmers markets. But always either keeping a visual eye on what is actually moving, what isn't, talking to your customers about what is good, what isn't, having thick skin when people say, "Oh, there was a caterpillar in my broccoli and it made me sick," and knowing, okay, I need to do something different. I need to plant different things. I need to take care of my plant different, um, so that it can dictate how you prepare your crop plan for the following year. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about like what happens in using your crop plan. Like you spend the winter going through these spreadsheets and it looks perfect and you know now you're an expert at farming and then you go out in the field and it humbles you yet again. So here are some things that we've learned that that really work for us to help maximize our crop plan. So the first thing is intercropping. On the right, you can see a photo. We've got some intercropping going on. There's romaine lettuce down the center and then broccoli on each side. This is an awesome combo. Normally, this would be like a bed and 2/3 if we just planted it out straight up and we didn't share the bed with two different crops. But broccoli and lettuce go hand in hand perfectly if you plant them the same day, and they're roughly, each 2 inches tall. Um, the lettuce grows very fast. You can, by the time it's ready to harvest, you harvest it from the center. That signals to the broccoli that there's all this space. Immediately, the broccoli leafs over and starts crowning up. So they don't compete with each other, and you didn't you saved yourself like 2/3 of a bed for that time. We've experimented with some things planting thing like radishes or turnips near our peas. That doesn't work because the peas want to trellis on the radishes. We've tried radicchio in the middle of our broccolis, but those are not as fast growing, so you don't have the same sort of result when the timing doesn't quite work. So it does involve a little bit of experimentation. This one works for us like all the time. I will evangelize this one. Then we have crop rotation is obviously very important. Um, if you if you have a perfect crop plan and you do it just right, but you just keep planting your tomatoes at the same spot every year, that's going to increase your chances of disease. It's going to deplete your soils. You got to keep rotating things. And again, on a half-acre farm, that's actually pretty challenging because you're planting things like 12 feet from where they were planted last year and you're calling it a rotation. But if you have a bigger plot, it can be done. And any amount of rotation is good. The soil microbes can move around. The soil diseases can move around, but at least you're putting some distance between last year's plan and this year's plan and the diseases that could follow with it. And then lastly, we're big proponents of soil health at Cimarron Community Farm. We use no-till practices, so we don't have a tiller. We let the soil it knows better than we do what it needs. So we put compost on, we put sustain on, and we also use landscape fabric. You can see there's white landscape fabric in this photo. This keeps down on weeds. This also keeps the soil very moist. It's a woven material that lets moisture in and then kind of locks it in the soil. So you could see on the left here, this is some soil that was like adjacent to this covered patch. So you could see this was during the drought like a couple years ago. There are literal cracks in the earth, like it was the playas of the West or something. And then directly next to it, you could pull back this white landscape fabric, and it was moist and conglomerate, and there were beetles and worms in it. It was like a very healthy and a living environment. And we found that, um, well, we'd like to think that our production, we can owe a lot of that to the no-till system. It's also easier, it's just faster and easier on our bodies to do it this way. But we find that protecting your soil health is just going to make your crop plan more efficient, and it all circles back to that underlying the fundamental idea of risk management. So how can you make sure that the things you plan to do on your farm, you don't have to redo. They are not done in vain. These kind of practices help with that. I can share my screen for a second. Um, I have my crop plan that I use, which is very similar to the one Eric shared. Can you all see it?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. So um, here you can see we have, it's very similar. It's just done in a different way because different people developed it. Um, but you can see we have like the dates for our CSA boxes. That's kind of what we use as our anchor point to start mapping out what we want when. So these will be all the CSA boxes, CSA box dates this year. And then here's all of the crops that we've ever grown, that we want to grow, that we could grow. We don't do all of them, but this is like what we have and when we want it. And normally we go through and put X's here to kind of um, project what we want on those dates. We also have here like week 1 is June 4th, week 2, June 11th. And this helps with the formulas that we build into the planting plan. And then this is a crop table. So taking all those crops from the crop box timeline. Um, this is what Eric was talking about that Natalie has been working on, and I'm sure this is very different in a lot of ways than the details might be different than on the other tool, but this is what we've found. So for example, arugula, that's a direct seed item, weeks to harvest from planting, how we plant it. There's ones that go in the greenhouse, plugs per bed if it's a 45-foot bed, just some general facts about each crop so that when you go to your planting plan, it's pulling in. And this is, I'm guessing that the tool that Eric shared will be way more like gamified and user friendly. This is kind of a mess, but you can see that um, you can see here that we want baby carrots. That's going to go in box number 1. So that's that first week. That's June 4th. And then that tells us we use some calculations here. Um, and it says it's got to go in 4/9, April 9th. I mean, we've never actually gotten it in April 9th, but every April 9th we say, gosh, wouldn't that be nice if we could get it in? As soon as we can, though, we do throw them out in the field. We want 1 1/3 beds. That's because we know from all of our previous years what the poundage is and how long that lasts us throughout the season. Um, and yeah, some instructions of like how to plant it, what we've learned from our seeding tools. So a lot of customization for our tools, our farm, our soils, our bodies, what works best. Um, and so yeah, this we end up printing out. We select certain columns that are relevant, like not all of this gets printed out. So then out on the farm, because I don't like usually touch my computer for like 6 months during the farming season, out on the farm, there's this like filthy little folder and it has all of this information in there that's relevant. So it will say, okay, this week we got to plant baby carrots, 4/9, 1/3 of a bed, and this is the planting pattern. And then we say we date it and we check it off or we write notes. And then come November, December, January, when we're doing our crop plan again, we can look through that filthy document and say, oh, it looks like when we did 2 passes with the carrot plate on the earthway seeder, that was too dense. I'm gonna fill in that we only do 1 pass, and then that informs your decision making for the next year. Because again, you think you're an expert, but then you get back out there and you're like, I forgot how to use my seeder. It's just hard. It's hard to keep all of these things. They're all very specific crops that need specific things, and it's hard to keep all of that top of mind throughout the entire year. So writing down your notes is really important. Um, does anyone have any questions at this time about anything I've shared or the tool that Elise and I have developed?
And folks, all of these materials are going to be available. We'll send that out with the recording. And they were also posted on the in a QR code on the different slides where they appeared.
I don't have any questions from the chat, so I would encourage folks who are attending if you want to unmute and ask a question or put it in the chat. One question I had, Madeline, is how are you keeping track of records then going through the season? Are you writing it on the paper copy that you have at the farm?
Yeah, so a lot of our record keeping is done like paper and pencil at the farm. And then in the fall, once we've fully cleaned up and come inside, then we can transfer a lot of that into more of a digital format that is easy to retain. So we don't put like this is just one form of our record keeping. We also do a harvest log, which is when we where we write down when, what, and how much, and also where it goes, like which program it goes to. And that tool, that all that information helps inform us of how to plan for the following year as well. So it doesn't all go on this crop plan, although this is like if we mess up and don't print the crop plan right, it's not happening on the farm. Like the crop plan is the blueprint for how the farm will go this year. So it's important that we keep all that up to date.
Madeline, I was going to ask you about your intercropping. And is it, when you intercrop, do you have to do seed and seed, or could you do seedling and seed, like with the romaine and the broccoli? Are you putting in broccoli seedlings and then seeding the romaine? Or do they have to both start in the same form to kind of be at the same place?
Yeah, it all depends on which two crops you're intercropping. For the
Mhm.
broccoli and romaine combo, both are going in as seedlings. So we're starting those in the greenhouse, and we're also starting them at different times. So the broccoli needs about 6 weeks in the greenhouse, whereas romaine needs like 4 or 5 weeks in the greenhouse. So you're
Mhm.
starting them different times in the greenhouse. They're going out into the field, being planted at similar sizes, and then they're being harvested at different sizes at different times. And so playing around with that with different crops can be kind of challenging. This is one that we've learned from a previous farmer and kind of dialed in.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, there are so many combos that you can do, and yeah, trial by error is kind of the name of the game.
Yeah, I was just thinking about seeding lettuce early and then putting in broccoli seedlings, and I don't know if that would work or not, or they would just be at two different stages to benefit each other.
I think that would work if
Yeah.
you waited until the romaine seedling, if you timed it right, where the romaine seedling and the broccoli seedling were going to both be at the bed in the bed at the same time, the same size. That could
Mm-hmm.
work. So direct seeding your lettuce
Mm-hmm.
like 4 weeks before. Um
Putting in.
and then 2 weeks before that, greenhouse seeding your broccoli. All that could merge at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Look at the planting plan. There's a QR code for it. If you look at my planting plan, you'll get a little example of like romaine and broccoli and how they go. They start at different weeks and they end up in the same, being planted the same week.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
So next Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30, there will be a field day. Laura will be there. Madeline obviously will be there, and I think Elise too. We plan to have some food there. So folks, if you come hungry, you should have something to eat. And then you can just kind of walk around and see this, see the whole planting that Madeline has done, and kind of get a hands-on feel for what we've been talking about today. So please join us next Tuesday, 5:30 at Cimarron Community Farm. So, anything you have to say about that, Madeline?
No, that's about all. I hope to see you all there and more too, more people.
Yeah. Just another reminder before folks go here. Next month, we'll be talking about marketing and how marketing can relate to risk management. We'll have some tools to help you analyze your different market channels, see what ones are doing well for you, what ones are maybe costing you more than you may think, and all that good stuff. To register, go ahead and scan the QR code here with your phone, or you can go to gofarmconnect.org and register for that webinar. With that final reminder, I want to just thank everybody. Best of luck in the growing season. If you have already started most of your things and are kind of like, well, this would have been nice, feel free to download it or save it and use it next year in the planting season. So I want to thank Madeline, our speakers, and our staff here at RTC to helping us put on this webinar. And thanks for your time and sharing the lunch hour with us. And hopefully we'll see you next month. Bye,
Thank you.
folks.